This is a recording of my conversation with Mark West, head of Europe at 4Paradigm, a leading AI company from China that is expanding now abroad. We discuss 4Paradigm's technology, its applications and success stories across industries. We end with some globally relevant post-COVID trends in terms of further digitalization of Chinese enterprises. I'm talking to Mark West, head of Europe of 4Paradigm. 4Paradigm is one of the leaders in AI for enterprise in China. China is at the forefront of AI technology and applications. However, the companies driving this technology revolution are less known than their Western counterparts. I am excited to have the opportunity to learn more about one of the pioneers coming out of China. Mark, welcome. Please introduce yourself and 4Paradigm.
Thank you very much, Chip. I share your excitement at the topic. I think that all of us recognize that the connection of China to the rest of the world in terms of, well, everything, but certainly technology is one of the big stories of our lifetime. At Fourth Paradigm, we certainly have a role to play in this, in sort of bridging East and West and bringing our technology to the world. So in terms of an introduction to the company, I would describe Fourth Paradigm as one of the companies that you could think of as a pure play artificial intelligence company. It is not part of what we do. It is what we do. It's the core. It's everything to us in terms of enterprise grade artificial intelligence deployable across geographies, across industries. The company itself was founded back at the end of 2014. It was founded by Mr. Dai Wenyuan, who is very well known in China. He, as a university student, was a world champion in the famous ACM ICPC International Collegiate Programming Contest, which attracts the best talent around the world. And he's actually a known scholar in the field, like, with thousands of citations from his papers. The first major product that came onto the market was in 2016, which was the Sage AI platform. Sage came out about halfway through 2016, and very quickly recognition came for this in the form of winning the Chinese top prize for artificial intelligence innovation. And then we started to see a lot of international attention start to come from the specialists in the field. So, the likes of Gartner, Magic Quadrant, Deloitte, China Rising Star, CB Insights, Global AI 100, IDC last year confirmed that the Sage platform has the number one market share in China, and that's going up against the top players, both in China and internationally, including like Alibaba and Amazon and so forth. As for me, I'm British Canadian. I have a background in government. Then after an MBA and Master of Marketing, I transitioned into international finance. I was for years in investment banking securities in both Europe and Asia. And then I went to a couple of the top universities in Beijing to learn Chinese and Chinese business culture in more detail. And it was there that I encountered Fourth Paradigm and helped them with regards to deciding what their international expansion should look like, where it should be. And then I was asked by them to lead it in terms of the European expansion.
Mark, the use of AI in China is well documented in both consumer and B2B markets. What trends do you see with regard to Chinese AI technology for enterprises going abroad?
It's very interesting because I think that outside of China, including in Europe, there is a rapidly growing realization that in many cases, Chinese technology is not only international standard, but it's actually internationally leading, and that the applications in China are extremely interesting and innovative. So why have we not really seen these companies come overseas until quite recently? There are a few reasons for that. I mean, I think the first thing you need to consider is that the Chinese home market is so vast. And it's also highly competitive. So if you're going to establish a successful technology business in China, you have to be outstanding at it. There's a focus on the home market, which I think is quite understandable. There's also the fact that when you look at these Chinese technology companies, their core tech teams tend to be overwhelmingly Chinese. They recruit from the best Chinese students in China, and also from a lot of the Chinese diaspora who graduate from the top schools internationally. There can be a cultural barrier, a language barrier. I mean, it's very interesting. You can speak to somebody who could name a few dozen Western tech companies just off the top of their head, and even specific to AI. But then you ask them about China, and it's usually a really short list of companies they can call to mind. That, I strongly believe, changes from this year.
Mark, so what does For Paradigm do? What specific problem does it solve?
I would say there's a few different areas, a few different headings, if you like, that we could discuss. We can do the most modular targeted AI applications. We have in-house proprietary algorithms that we have applied and modified for success in a great many industries. Again, it's a key thing about Fourth Paradigm is that we're, if you like, industry agnostic. And so we can put this technology anywhere. So we can go in that very limited way. But actually, what we are specialists in, I would say, is a more ambitious digital transformation using AI technology in all facets of an organization. And we're happy to start with somebody who's very sophisticated, who has an in-house data science team, but we're also happy to start with somebody who doesn't have any of that. Another thing is it's very much about lowering the barriers to AI. Again, the AI democratization, which is something that we're seeing more and more, and an insistence more and more, this will require us not to be so dependent on data scientists, because there just aren't enough of them, and there will not be enough of them for probably decades, given the demand for AI. So it needs to be that the IT professionals and even normal managers and so forth become more involved in AI, but you need to make the technology user-friendly, transparent. And we solve problems related to, depending on the industry, it can be precision marketing. In the case of, like, for example, retail, we can do precision marketing. But precision marketing can be modified and used very effectively for things like financial services and media. And we also do things related to anti-fraud, anti-money laundering in the financial services area. We do demand forecasting. We have a very long list of use cases that we can usually either just take off the shelf or modify for whatever local needs the client would have.
Mark, so what type of companies use For Paradigm today, and which industries? Could you also share some success stories?
In terms of industries, when I used to work in financial services, we used to talk in terms of, there being roughly 11 industries that we categorize the world into. And I think in Fourth Paradigm, we already have successful use cases in like 9 of the 11. In terms of what does a Fourth Paradigm client look like? Well, we have a lot of giant enterprises. We have, for example, in the financial services sector in China, we have all 5 of the top 5 Chinese banks, who are also, by the way, our investors, which is a pretty nice endorsement, I dare say. But we also have a fashion house. We also have a grocery store chain. We have one of the leading fast food chains. We have a couple of the top energy companies in the world. We also have small and medium-sized businesses. We can go to a local hospital and we can deploy AI solutions for a doctor or a medical team that has zero AI background or knowledge. One of our key partners in China is essentially, I guess you could say, it would be the Chinese equivalent to the American Mayo Clinic, what really top, well-respected hospital and network of hospitals. So what do they all have in common? I think it's just that they have in common, they have data that they suspect, and they're probably right, is not being leveraged to maximize its value to the business.
So which of the many use cases do you think show the biggest potential for European companies?
There's a type of AI problem that we refer to as binary classification. For a particular question, you want a yes or no answer. This is an area of extreme expertise at Fourth Paradigm. We are a world leader in this area. And so, for example, the financial services industry is really a good match for this type of problem, because you've got a lot of binary classification issues. Do we approve this loan? Is this transaction valid, or is it potentially fraudulent? We think that in the European market, there is a very high demand for that type of expertise. It is something that we at Fourth Paradigm have deployed very successfully in financial services in China with, again, the biggest banks in the world. Another one that's maybe a bit interesting is OCR, optical character recognition. Some people think that this is perhaps not so exciting because some people think of it as just in terms of, well, handwriting. How many people do handwriting these days? Well, first of all, OCR is not all about handwriting. It can be written materials in any context, but even in the handwriting, like we have the applications which would be, I think, extremely useful in Europe with regards to form filling. If you have a business that fills out forms, especially by hand, but even not necessarily, the ability to instantly convert that into digital form and accurately, of course, translate, to do that in digital form is very valuable. For example, insurance claims. If you have an automobile accident and you have somebody on site who is collecting information, and people are providing that by writing notes, even electronically, to be able to have something that just instantly categorizes the information according to previously determined tags and can slot that into a central database for instant processing. I mean, we have seen in some cases reductions in manual labor inputs up to over 90%.
Mark, how do companies start working with Four Paradigm? How does an implementation look like?
You have, first and foremost, the need to define the business problem. There's almost invariably, I mean, we would always, frankly, you probably insist on it, a proof of concept. And then we move into the implementation stage, and we implement, we stabilize, and then we expand. And the implementation is actually, it's often a bit anticlimactic because, the way that Fourth Paradigm is arranged is we can typically deploy things even remotely. Like a one-click deployment is often the way that we operate. And again, this is quite actually well suited to a COVID-19 world that we have built this into our process. We don't need to necessarily be on site to do a lot of things. But then the last step is actually the most exciting, which is the expand, and that's where we move from the initial AI problem that we defined, and then we can discuss where to roll out the next AI solution. And often starting from that first algorithm or that very first problem solving capability the client gets, there is a whole world that opens up in terms of how the technologies can be rolled out laterally or deepened to eventually, in the Fourth Paradigm view of the world, create a fully digitally transformed organization, which is still doing their core business, but they're supported at every step by world-class AI that they can not only benefit from, but they can understand, they can interact with, they can modify.
Mark, I would like to end with a more current topic. What are some of the avenues you saw AI being put to use to fight the COVID crisis in China? And generally, what are some developments you see in China that opened up earlier than the rest of the world?
Well, yes. I mean, COVID-19 has changed everything in China, just as it has in Europe and everywhere else. And China being, one of the first country to go into this COVID-19 crisis, and now being arguably the first to come out of the crisis, yeah, there are some interesting lessons to draw. So first of all, in terms of the actual handling of the COVID-19 crisis, AI played a role in that, absolutely, and Fourth Paradigm played a central role in that, I dare say, in terms of the AI component to the crisis management. You have the generation of huge quantities of data in a medical crisis. You have obviously the data in hospitals, which is being generated by all the patients. You've got the logistical data. You've got the tracking, the tracing of the virus as it spreads. It creates huge amounts of data. And so AI is really well suited to this. If it's a really good, sophisticated program, it can, quote unquote, keep up with these developments in real time. So what the fourth paradigm technology was used for in the COVID-19 crisis was for the processing of huge quantities of data. It's rather mind-boggling. Like we say, our Sage platform is capable of doing trillion-level feature processing, and it's necessary. That type of power is necessary in this type of for problems of this scale. In understanding the scenarios, the implication of pulling this policy lever versus that one, and when you do so, and what the overall infection rate would look like, the R rate that we always hear about now in terms of the transmission from one person to another, and whether it's greater than or less than one. This was used in a big way in China to help them to control the epidemic and to guide the reopening of the country, which we're seeing right now. That's the crisis. In terms of more broadly, this crisis has, I think, for a lot of Chinese companies across the spectrum, from small to huge, world's biggest in some cases, across the spectrum of industries, has caused a realization that you need to have your business as digitalized, as remotely operable as it can possibly be, because you just never know. You'll wake up one day and you might be in lockdown, and your ability to physically deploy resources has disappeared. And so we at Fourth Paradigm expect that the Chinese market is going to experience another massive surge in growth. I think we're already seeing it in terms of the investments of companies to go online, to digitalize, to make sure that, if we do have another horrible crisis like this, the effects on the business will be minimized, and that the ability to look after your employees and keep them connected, the ability to service your customers who are depending on you, the ability to maintain communications with your suppliers is all maintained as much as it can possibly be. China's already been a leader in delivery of goods. Like, it's phenomenal. If you're just a normal person in China, as I was, and you wish to have something delivered to you, something obscure at 9 p.m, suddenly you have a need for, I don't know, it could be like an over-the-counter pharmaceutical product just to help you with a headache or something like that. You'll have it by probably 9:20 or 9:30. We are seeing the widening expansion of that as well. Businesses that were maybe partially online are now saying, no. Like, we thought we were good. We thought we were in a good position to weather a shock. We thought that we had a good balance of capabilities. We're not where we need to be. We need to double it. We need to triple it. We need to do so within 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, as the case may be.
Marius, was very interesting and informative. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure, Chip, and I appreciate you and PwC allowing us to have this type of conversation. And I've benefited from your previous podcast. So, no, thank you very much for having us.